In life, we all encounter obstacles, and those obstacles come in all different shapes, sizes, and forms. The question is, how do we handle those obstacles? Do we attack them head on, or do we allow them to make us quit? Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up on themselves, their dreams, or their goals. We will interview successful people from all walks of life as they share their no-quit stories when they had the choice to give up or give in, but they didn't. We thank you for listening, and we hope to be that jolt of positivity as you go for your greatness. Welcome to episode number 208 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is passion. Our quote of the day comes to us from Oprah Winfrey. Passion is energy. Feel the power that comes from focusing on what excites you. Today's episode is sponsored by the good people over at West Fair Communications, who publish the Westchester County Business Journal and the Fairfield County Business Journal. These newspapers do a wonderful job in covering all aspects of the business world within two of the most influential markets in the New York metropolitan area. You can also take advantage of their daily news feeds, which keep track on the companies and thought leaders in these important regions. For more information, take a look at www.westfaironline.com. Trust me, once you start reading, you won't quit. It is an honor to bring you today's episode, which happens to feature our first Major League Baseball player as a guest. From Major League Baseball to owning a zoo, living in his van, and now into real estate, Shea Hillenbrand has had quite an interesting path. He shares his story with us passionately and with the hope of helping others. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Shea, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on.
So the first question I ask everybody is, are you ready to bring it today?
Oh, I'm always ready to bring it, man. I'm a high achiever, man, peak performer. So I actually sweat when I sleep, so I'm ready to go, brother.
All right, so as we were talking about before we went live, the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you had either a no-quit story of your own or perhaps a really challenging time that you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome that you have that and you asked that. I actually have it tattooed on my arm, Against All Odds, and I have a nonprofit foundation called Against All Odds where we help kids through that process. But for myself, my story starts when I was 5, 6 years old. I'd be playing out front in a driveway, playing basketball with my dad and my two older brothers. And I was ultra competitive, but they would never let me compete. So it was almost like a bully situation where my older brothers and my dad would always like slam the ball in my face and wouldn't let me take that shot and wouldn't let me even participate. So ultimately, every single time, actually it seems like every single time, I'd run into the house crying because I was so intensely going insane, out of control with my emotions. And my dad would be screaming, "Go inside, you effing female anatomy between your legs." And I go to my room, and when he'd tell me to go to my room, he'd always tell me to go in my room, time out, take off your clothes. And I didn't understand that at 6, 7, 8 years old, but looking back now, that's the ultimate way to strip a kid's identity, is to have them go to the room and take off their clothes. Nothing sexual, anything of that sort, of molestation, anything. It was just like, go take ultimate control situation. But I would sit in my room every single day after that situation. I'd say, forget him. I'm going to freaking prove him wrong and prove that I'm worth. And the only way I'd find solitude is in my community with my friends and being one of the number one baseball players, sports players growing up. Actually, when I was in elementary school, all the kids would call me Mr. Shea. So when I was 14 years old, my dad walked into my room and he told me and I was sitting on my bed and he told me to sit down and he said, "I'm going to uproot our family from Southern California. I'm going to move to Arizona." And I was like, what? And the story I told myself, because this was right before my freshman year and sophomore year. So freshman year in Southern California is 9th grade, which is junior high, and sophomore year is high school. So right before there, I was getting to go play baseball. I had my community, had my friends. And what happened was the story I told myself was, I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough, and my dad doesn't love me. Because how can he take me from all my friends, my community? So when I left Southern California and reluctantly left all my friends, I decided to become a little achiever through athletics and become an overachiever to prove my worth to my dad. So I became the number one soccer player in the state of Arizona in high school. And out of high school, I had nowhere to go to play baseball. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Because my childhood dream is to play Major League Baseball. So I walked on at the local junior college, and I made the team because of my work ethic. And from that point on, I decided to work my tail off. And in 3 years, I became the #1 baseball player in Arizona, which is crazy because I just walked on at the junior college level. So with that being said, I got drafted by the Red Sox in the 10th round because my childhood dream was to play Major League Baseball. You got to understand this. Picture this in your mind. Growing up in Southern California, I was a diehard Dodger fan. I would sit at the top of the stadium with my nachos in one hand, my malt in the other hand, chocolate malt, and I'd sit there with my mom and my best friend, and I'd say, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to be down on that field someday." I didn't care about the players. I just wanted to make all my dreams become tangible at that point in time. So I listened to the crack of the bat, the roar of the crowd, the smell of the grass. And I always ended and imagined that now batting, number 29, Shea Hillenbrand. See what happens when you want to go pursue a dream, when you want to be against all odds, you gotta make your dream become tangible because your mind can't discern the difference between imagination and reality. And the only reason I'm telling you is that because when I got drafted by the Red Sox, I proceeded to tell all my friends and family that I got drafted by the White Sox. Imagine this, in junior college, I got drafted by the White Sox, and all my friends were saying, "What are you talking about, dude? You got drafted by the Red Sox." I didn't even know what team I got drafted by, but I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player to prove my worth to my father. So I'd always answer that question 2 times. I'd always say, all right, guys, you got to understand. You got to listen up. I grew up in Southern California, a diehard Dodger fan. All right, so I don't know anything about baseball outside of Dodgers because we'd show up in the 3rd inning and we leave in the 7th inning to beat traffic and listen to Vince Scully on the radio. That's the consistency of being a diehard Dodger fan in the 1980s. And my second answer all the time would be, I don't care what Sox it is, I'm going to the major leagues. That's it. So I go to my first spring training with the Red Sox and in the minor leagues. I'm hitting in the batting cage afterwards because I'm the first guy there, last guy to leave. And the minor league director comes up to me. I don't even know what I'm doing. I barely even know what team I'm on. And he says, "Son, I got to talk to you." And I said, "Yes, sir." He comes over and he says, "Hey, you have all the makings to become a Major League Baseball player and make millions and millions of dollars in the major leagues." I was so green at it. I didn't know what to do, man. I was like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. So this minor league director laid out this plan for me, and I implemented that plan. So that's the second thing. The first thing is you got to make your dreams become tangible. And the second thing is you got to find somebody that's been there and done that and knows what you're trying to achieve. You can't. It cuts down your learning curve so much. And then you have to have them lay out a plan for you. Then the third thing, which is the most difficult thing to do, is you have to implement that plan. And I did it against all odds. I was there working and working. I never worked harder in my life. And in 5 years, I was player of the year 3 of the 5 years in the minor leagues. Mind you, I walked on at junior college. With that being said, I got my shot in the major leagues. I made it. I did it. I'm sitting on the field in Baltimore on opening day in 2001, and I was slated to be the starting catcher in AAA for the Pawtucket Red Sox. And you mind you, I was the first guy to come to the major leagues for the Red Sox from AA since the 1970s. Imagine that, like 30 years of like in a prestigious organization. I'm the first guy to do that. And this is that little kid in a driveway that his dad told him to go in the house, you effing little crazy. And I made it, but I was conflicted because I was so excited. I had tears coming down my face on opening day in Baltimore in 2001. I was a starting third baseman for the Red Sox. And then I also had this gut-wrenching feeling inside myself of like this pain and hurt and frustration and anger, like I'm disconnected. So with that being said, over the next 7 years of my life, I had 7 years in the major leagues. I made $20 million in highlight after highlight after highlight after highlight. I was the first guy to hit a game-winning home run off Mariano Rivera in Boston for a Red Sox player. I was in 2 All-Star games. I hit 3 home runs in 1 game for the Diamondbacks. I was in a perfect game. Like all this stuff. And I'm not saying that to gloat. I'm just saying that it's possible. And I was a 2-time All-Star. But after 7 years, I was sitting on my couch in my family room with my son in my arms, my firstborn son. I have 3 adopted children. And I was sitting on the couch with my firstborn son in my arms. I was trying to have a father-son moment because my wife and I were trying to have kids for 4 years. We couldn't have it. And all I ever wanted to do was to be a father, to prove that I love him unconditionally, not like my dad did with myself. And I was looking into my son's eyes, and I sat there and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. My son's going to have a bright future. I love this kid. I don't care if he's adopted. He's my son. He's my everything. And all I was trying to do is show my pure agape love for him, and I couldn't. All I can connect to is the pain and that hurt that resonated deep inside my soul, that made me numb to everything and everybody around me. And right there with my son in my arms in the prime of my career, I made a decision, sitting on my couch right here in Arizona. I made the biggest decision of my life. I quit. I quit Major League Baseball. I walked away. I walked away from my one childhood dream. I worked my tail off my whole life for everything that I did in the prime of my Major League Baseball career. And I convinced myself if I just come home to be a father to my 3 children and pursue my second dream, and my second dream was owning a zoo. See, a lot of people don't know that. I used to own a zoo. I had 300 farm and exotic animals. I had a dog rescue. I rescued 1,000 dogs and adopted them out in 4 years. And I quickly became the biggest and baddest place in town. But after 4 years, that came with a steep price. I lost everything. I received my fourth foreclosure notice on my horse farm. I was losing my family. My bank account was dwindling away. And I sat there with nothing left. I've never been more scared in my life. So at that point in time, I was like, oh my gosh, I lost everything in my life 4 years after I came out of the major leagues to pursue my second dream. And I had nothing left. Nothing. I was living in a $750,000 house, no electricity, no nothing. I'd take my son's bicycle to go to the church 45 minutes away. I didn't even have a car. See, when I was playing Major League Baseball, I had 3 mansions, 6 cars, 300 pairs of shoes. I spent $1 million on private jets. I hung out with the presidents. I was on TV in front of millions of people on stage, and I lived a life. But 4 years later, I was sitting there, and I had nothing. And I'm a believer. I believe in the spiritual realm, and I believe in God. So I started going to church. And I went to church, and I tried to find a balance between my mind, body, and my spirit. And I started to find a little bit of a solitude and a little bit of balance. And I started speaking in churches. I started speaking in schools. I started speaking in prisons. I started giving back because my mission is to help people against all odds. But after that, I really realized in a quick instance that even church was putting a Band-Aid on what I was doing. See, what happens was, like, I was hurt still. I was pain still. And every time I went to bed, I had this pain resonating inside myself that I hated myself. I hated everything about me, and I was trying to do everything I can to help everybody else. So fast forward a year later, I found myself on the floor of a van in front of my ex-wife's house. See, 4 years ago, I used to live in a van. And it's very, very hard to say because it's something that's like nobody realizes. And I'm on this floor of this van, and after taking 15 sleeping pills and 8 ibuprofen 800s, and I don't know how many drinks of alcohol just to numb that pain, I hate myself. I'm a failure. I don't know what I'm doing. I quit baseball. You're a failure because you got in a fight with Theo Epstein with the Red Sox. You got in a fight with John Gibbons, the manager of the Blue Jays. You got traded after traded from team to team to team because nobody wanted you. And I laid there, and all I could think about was, what would my parents think if I left this world today? What kind of dad would do this to his kids? I left baseball to be a dad to my kids. But all the while, my mind's telling me just to do it, just let go. So I just let go. I couldn't go anymore. I don't know if I died or if I fell asleep. And the next day, the sun peered through the front windshield of my van, and it woke me up. And when I came to, I realized, I was like, oh my gosh, I had no side effect. No nausea, no headache, no stomachache, no nothing. And in the concoction of pills and alcohol I took the night before, I should have either had 2 options, in the hospital or dead, because I just wanted to numb that pain. And right at that moment, I had an aha moment. I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And the first thought, and this is all divine, or whatever you guys, divine, karma, whatever it is, the first thought that went through my mind is, where's my horse? And I was like, what do you mean, where's my horse? See, what happens when you get to the major leagues, when you get on top of the world, you always have a first purchase. And some people buy mama a house, some people buy themselves a house, a big house, some people buy a car. I bought a horse. See, I grew up in Southern California. I was a city slicker, and I was like, oh my gosh, dude, like I want to buy a horse. So I bought a horse. And 4 years after I lost my farm, I was on the floor of this van. I almost died. The next day I woke up. First thought that goes through my mind when I came through was, where's my horse? And my horse's name is CL. So I called my friend that helped me get rid of all my animals. Mind you, like I told you, I had 300 farm and exotic animals. I had 56 horses. And I said, hey, can you help me find my horse? I didn't even have enough food that day. I didn't have enough money for food. I didn't have enough money to get my gas to my van to the next place. I had no idea where I was going. And I told my friend, I said, can you help me find my horse, dude? And he said, what horse? You had 56, Shea. And I said, the horse. He's like, Coors Light? And I was like, yeah. So when I got to the big leagues, I bought a quarter horse and named him Coors Light. I thought it was cool. And he says, I'll find him for you. And he went on this reconnaissance mission. And that night he called me and he says, I found your horse, dude. And I said, okay. He said, reach out to this person on Facebook that has your horse. So I went back to my van that night that was down by the river, not my mansion, not my car. I was living in that van. And I reached out to this person on Facebook and I said, hey, can you help me? Do you have my horse? And that person instantly messaged me back. I remember this person vaguely from my horse farm when I owned my horse farm, which was my zoo. And the only thing I remember about that person was that person shopped in the feed store and the person had a great smile on their face. And that person instantly messaged me back, why? I was like, I don't know, man. Like I was gonna tell him, like, last night I almost overdosed on drugs, I almost died, and I'm just trying to write a good feeling. See, when you think about things, thoughts create emotions, and emotions create actions. When I thought about this horse, it brought me from hell to heaven, and it took me to a spot from despair and hating myself to some kind of stimulation, some kind of adrenaline, some kind of dopamine release that drove me to reach out to find that horse. See, what happens is a lot of times with people, what they do is they go into a situation where they get these thoughts and they get these feelings, but they don't act. You got to be bold and you got to get out there and act. It doesn't matter if you're in the floor of a van or on a Major League Baseball field hitting in front of 50,000 people or doing a podcast in front of millions of people. You got to act. So I reached out to that person. The reason why that person said why to me when I asked him about where my horse was because the day before, I'm telling you, brother, this is divine. The day before, this person sent this horse to Utah because that person was going through a divorce. So 4 years after I lost my farm, I reached out to find my horse, my first purchase in the major leagues after losing $20 million. See, I was a $100 million player. And I walked away in the prime of my career because I was empty. I was stuck in a position called WTF. I was weary, tired, and frustrated. And I walked away to pursue a new dream and try to jump to a new thing and to a new thing to a new thing because I was stuck. And long story short, all that time I was stuck, whether it was in a van or on the floor of a van, I've gone 4 days without eating food. I would pray every single night, like, God, please bring me that person to me that can just give. I can't do it. I'm stuck. I know how to hit a baseball. I'm one of the best in the world, but I'm so stuck and messed up in my mind, I can't do it. So long story short, that person that had my horse is my wife today.
Wow, in Utah?
Here in Arizona.
That's amazing. I appreciate you sharing what you said, and I think you have an incredible story, and I think the best part about your story is you said the 3 letters WTF, and I wanted to just ask you if you wouldn't mind sharing with our listeners a little bit of what you're doing with that today, because before we went live, you're telling me about some of the exciting stuff that you're doing with your coach now.
Yeah, so by the grace of God, he brought Kristen, my wife, today to me, and she supported me. She's the first person ever to say I love you unconditionally. This is the primetime Major League Baseball player that's had everything in the world. Listen to that. The first person at 40 years old to say I love you and I believe in you. So a couple of years ago, I made a successful transition into real estate, and that road has been fun to travel. But what I'm most excited about is partnering with my success coach, Josh Clark, to help a generation of men get unstuck from WTF and break through to true personal freedom. See what the thing is, WTF is a season of life where every high-achieving man finds himself in at some point in time. For some, WTF stands for, like for me, it was weary, tired, and frustrated. I was weary of the game, I was tired of the grind, and I was frustrated that there wasn't any fulfillment for the current level of success I was having. And for others, WTF stands for where's the freedom? They feel trapped in the life they have. And some people out there listening right now, I'm sure they feel trapped with the life that they have. They feel like the massive amount of effort they're pouring into maintaining the life they have, which I did, is keeping them from creating the life they've always wanted. But for everyone, WTF feels like what the F. When I was a man, when men get to a place where they're stuck in WTF, what do? They sabotage, they settle, or they start over. And for those 3 choices, you'll never get to where you want to go. And for me, when I was stuck in WTF, like I was telling you, I was in the prime of my Major League Baseball career, and what did I do? In the prime of my career, what did I do? I just walked away. I walked away from my one childhood dream I had. I worked my tail off my whole life to pursue another dream of owning a zoo. And who does that? Like, who would go from a Major League Baseball player to owning a zoo? That person in WTF. And, I left that one dream that I was on top of the game with, and to pursue a new dream. And that I didn't have to slide. I had no clue what I was doing when I went to the zoo. And I purchased that $5 million zoo. And within the 4 years, I lost that. And, not every guy needs to buy a zoo. Matter of fact, I wouldn't suggest that. But guys make big jumps all the time. This is where I want you to listen. Everybody out there. Guys make big jumps all the time when they're stuck in WTF. They jump to a new relationship. I've done that. They jump to a new career. I've done that. Or worse yet, they settle for WTF and they try to distract themselves with booze and boobs. But, you can't do that. You can't settle. You can't sabotage, and you don't need to start over. And that's the biggest thing is those 3 S's. You don't need to settle. You don't need to sabotage. And you don't need to start over. Definitely don't start over. Just stay where you're at. You just need to invest that time to figure it out. And, where you're at, how you got there and where you want to go. So you can actually break through the next level of success. And this is actually what I experienced with my success coach, Josh Clark. I met him and I experienced this whole thing I'm talking to you about right now with him. If I would have had Josh when I was playing Major League Baseball, guaranteed, I know it can for a fact I would have been a $100 million player. And I wouldn't have quit, and I definitely wouldn't have bought a zoo. And engaging with Josh, it changed everything in my life. And together we are building a community of men called the Richer Life Warrior. And this community is making a huge difference in so many men's lives. And since engaging with Josh, I'm back living the all-star experience back again. It's taken me forever, for years. And I'm finally where I want to be with fulfillment, with clarity, with passion, with drive. My real estate business is exploding. And, through the partnership with Josh, I'm connecting millions of men. I have a vision, brother, of helping and impacting and inspiring 100 million people. And I'm just connecting those men with the simple techniques I use to personally transform my life. And if you're a guy out there and you can relate to this, in WTF, you don't need to settle, you don't need to start over, and you definitely don't need to buy a zoo. You can check out what I'm doing at www.don'tgetstuckintwtf.com. And I urge you guys to go there right now. Go check it out right now. It's www.don'tgetstuckintwtf.com. We have free content there for you to check out. Just give us our email so we can follow up with you and show and share with you how you can engage with us in our Richer Life Warrior community. And we're offering men to come out to Southern California and hang out with us for the weekend. So super, super stoked about that. I have a vision of being the Tony Robbins of baseball.
I love it. So I gotta ask you, Shea, and I totally appreciate not only your candor but being just incredibly vulnerable and honest, and I appreciate that because I think that's where you really learn. And one of the things we often talk about on our show is the idea of taking action. So when you met your coach, what is it that got you to the point where you were willing or open to hire a coach or work with a coach? Because I think those are the things that we would like to touch upon, because I know a lot of our listeners may be stuck, might be wanting to do different things, but the difference of thinking about it, I think, is the people that look back at life and say woulda, coulda, shoulda, as opposed to the people that go ahead and take action. So do you have any words of wisdom in regards to how you got to the point where you are with Josh?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a great question, and that's the biggest thing. If with someone like myself who was an elite athlete, a peak performer, a celebrity, it's hard to get guys in my situation to even share. But the number one thing that I want everybody to understand and getting into this personal development, this personal help space, is vulnerability is power. See, what happens is so many guys can't relate to me hitting a home run off Mariano Rivera or being a 2-time All-Star on top of the world. But what they can relate to is the vulnerability. And if you understand your story with where you're at, just be vulnerable and allow yourself. The hardest thing for me to do was to ask for help. See, I provided for everybody. I've given over $1 million away to help people. I was Mr. Shea. I was like the God. I was like everything. And for me to ask for help was the hardest thing to do, but the most empowering thing I could do. And the next thing is finding someone who's been there and done that you could trust. You got to trust somebody who's been there and done it. It could be a podcaster. It could be YouTubers. Like I love Ed Milet. Ed Milet is absolutely amazing. I stumble across him on YouTube, and I'm watching his stuff all the time. And I have aspirations of meeting him and sharing and going. And he's taught me so much. And one of those things is the next thing is systems and processes. To get to the top, you have to have a process. Like I have a process. I have my morning routine. I from 8 in the morning till noon. I'm working hardcore on real estate. You have to have that structure. You have to have that grind. You have to have that hunger. And having those simple, specific systems and processes in place. Every successful person has that. My alarm goes off every hour throughout the day. Every single hour to get me reconnected to where I am. I got to drink my 20 ounces of water, and I got to make sure I'm on task. If not, I'm just all over the place. See, what happens, guys, is that to hit a Major League Baseball, you have to have specific focus. See, if you don't have specific focus and if you have generalized focus, which a lot of people do, they have all these stresses, all this stuff going on, and they want to fill everything with external fixes, right? So you have to have a specific focus. If your thoughts are generalized, those cause confusion in your mind. And if you're confused, 100% of the time, the byproduct is no self-confidence. You have to have specific focus on task at hand and love, be in the grind. Have your focus on the end result, but be on the grind and do the work. Like I walked on at a junior college, 2-time MLB All-Star, could have made $100 million. I was stuck in WTF where I'm at. We've mastered this to figure this out to help other people. I'm just like everybody else. And that's what I want to make everybody. I don't have this amazing talent, this amazing gift. I'm not like set apart. And I just grinded harder than everybody else.
I think it's so key, and you touched on quite a few things. But one thing I want to touch on that you just said is the fact that you walked on your junior college team and you became a 2-time Major League Baseball All-Star player. And I want to hopefully impart and share on our listeners is it doesn't matter where you are in life. There's always an opportunity. You always have something that you can do. And the other thing that you said, which I thought was really interesting, and I happen to be a fan myself of Ed Milet, and I've tried to get him on the show a few times, but you said something that was just amazing, because I think it's something that we often forget is you've never met Ed, yet he's had a profound positive impact because you follow the things that he teaches and you follow the things that he speaks about. And that's one thing that I want to impart on the listeners is you can have mentors that are people that are really important in your life, and it doesn't mean you have to have met them. It doesn't mean that they need to be in the same city or the same state. You just have to be willing, like you said before, and like I mentioned, to put in that work and to find those systems and to have those different processes that literally take you from one place to the other. So wanted to ask you, Shea, in regards to Ed and other people, if you're reading anything right now or if you've read something recently that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
I'm diving deep into Relentless by Tim Grover.
Great book.
And that's like, I just almost threw the book, I almost jumped out of the window because it's like, that's me. Like, that's me. I'm the cleaner. Because you have coolers, you have closers, and you have cleaners. And oh my gosh, that's me. Those 13 principles of that's me. That's me. But I try to disconnect from those principles because I tried to prove everything I could do and all my worth to everybody else, like my father and every authoritative figure in that situation. But instead of just being me and understand how to refine me. So I'm doing that. And then I got the shoe doctor, for Nike.
Phil Knight,
Yeah, Phil, just reading. And the biggest thing that I've learned lately, though, and I'm introverted. I'm that guy, and it's crazy because I could hit in front of 50,000 people in Yankee Stadium. I had the 3rd highest active batting average. But when I walked out of the stadium and when I went to a restaurant, in a 5-star restaurant in New York, I couldn't get up at my table to walk across the restaurant to go to the restroom in fear of everybody staring at me because I had no self-confidence. See, what happens is the way you get self-confidence, like Ed Milet says, and I love it, is you have to keep those promises that you make to yourself. Do those little things, and you have to go out there and fail. You have to fail. You have to fail. I can't tell you how many times I've failed all the way to the top. You have to fail, and the people out there that are failing right now, they're learning and they're growing. So it's not really a failure. It's just a mistake. So you just go out there and you just fail and figure it out and fail and figure it out and fail. Don't be afraid because we haven't been put here just to be complacent. We've all got gifts. We've all got talents. We all have opportunities to use those to make somebody else's life better. And I'm telling you, there's no greater feeling with all the millions of dollars I've made, all the star status I've had, is using those talents that I have to help other people. And that's where my focus is now with the WTF and the Richer Life Warrior community.
No, it's awesome, and I appreciate you diving into some of those books and the things that you're reading. I wanted to ask you an interesting question. If you could define yourself, but you had to only use one word, what would that word be?
Passion.
I think that hits you right on the head, because you're incredibly passionate about your story. But I love your vulnerability, because that's actually a word that we've spoken about so many times. And a good friend of mine, Lucas Mack, was a guest on my show. I'm actually going to make an introduction for you to hopefully be on his show. But he talks about how vulnerability is actually power, and how being vulnerable empowers you. And I think that's the biggest misconception in men and women, but especially with men, is I think the old adage with vulnerability is weakness and being soft. But I think the reality is you have to be strong and incredibly powerful to say, hey, I need some help. And one thing you touched on every single time you talked about that is you find people that have done it or been there before you, and it shortens the learning curve. But more importantly is, why recreate the wheel if there's people that have been there? So for example, when you were in the minor leagues, you had people that took you under their wing because they'd been there before. They've taught and they've coached all-stars and MVPs, and the reality is that's the best way to learn. So if any of our listeners are taking any of what amazing stuff you said, I think one of the things they definitely need to take is the concept of just finding other people that have been there before you and ask for some help. Say, hey, I'm struggling with this, or hey, I'm looking to get into this business or industry, or looking to get this license, wondering if you'd give me 5 or 10 minutes to kind of give me some advice or guidance.
And that's the thing is, and I'm really glad you brought that up, because believe it or not, people that are very successful, like when I was on top of the world, successful with baseball, people that have success like it when people come to them and ask them how to do what you're doing. Believe it or not. And if they're selfish and don't want to help you, screw them. Go on to the next person. But I loved helping out young players. I loved helping out people, and I love going to people right now. And I have no problem going to it, because I know who I am. I know where I want to go. Having that clarity is extremely important of where you want to go. And then that reticular activating system in your mind, just set that on that and you go. Like I told you, when I was 9 years old, 10 years old, I'm going to the big leagues, going to the big leagues, going to the big leagues. And I made that tangible. That reticular activating system will set you there. But if you're struggling about, this bill, struggling about this car payment, this mortgage payment, or pleasing this person, or I'm struggling to be a good father or whatever, that's going to be tough. So there's so much information out there. There's so many people out there, and hopefully you can find something that resonates with you, and just go for it. Life's way too short not to use your talents to help other people out.
No, I think what you just said is so true. Is successful people like to help other people, and if they don't, you just move on to the next person and ask them for help. And I think that's the biggest thing that people are scared of is they're fearful of not only being vulnerable and honest and open, but asking for help. And I think that's the one thing that hopefully we can impart on the listeners today, is the importance of finding those people that have been there, that have done that before you, and just being real and say, hey, love to get 5 or 10 minutes of your time. So Shea, we could literally talk for hours, but I want to jump onto what we call our hot seat questions. And the only thing we ask is if you wouldn't mind just spitting out the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, hopefully it's clean, because go ahead. Yeah, absolutely. I'm ready.
All right. So, favorite sport?
Cheerleading.
Favorite team?
I don't have one.
All right. Favorite smell?
Money.
All-time favorite movie?
Varsity Blues.
All-time favorite book?
Relentless by Tim Grover.
Favorite band or group?
Favorite band or group is Garth Brooks.
Do you have a favorite quote?
Yes. It's not about the technique. It's how you teach a technique that stimulates transformation and creates growth. I made it up myself.
Nice. And then if you were stuck in a foxhole and you could only have one person in there with you, who would it be and why?
It's crazy. It has to be Ed Milet. Ed Milet.
That'd be
just I resonate with him. He's real. He's like me. It's honest. I know like myself, I'll die for somebody. And that's what it is.
Awesome. And then last question is, before we let you go, wanted to ask you if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners.
Don't be afraid to fail. Every single successful person has failed. I was on top of the world. I lost everything. I went through absolute hell, and I never gave up. But the one thing is recently I was at a mastermind convention, and this gentleman came sitting next to me, and that happens to be Josh Clark, my partner, my business coach, and my life coach. And I sat there, and he was in awe with me. And he had no clue where I was. And I said, dude, can you help me, please? And just ask for help and get there and refine what you got and give what you have to other people. There's no better feeling in the world. There's no money. There's no car. There's no jet. I've flown private jets, mansions, cars. There's no feeling in the world other than to utilize your gifts to make somebody else's life better, period.
That's amazing, amazing parting words. And listen, Shea, I truly appreciate not only your time, but what you shared with us. And I look forward to hopefully talking with you soon.
Yes, thank you so much, buddy. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to episode number 208. 7 years into his very successful baseball career, as a two-time All-Star and on the cusp of signing a large major league deal, Shea walked away from the game. It took him many years and quite a few failures along the way to get to where he is today. But along it, he kept on going and he didn't quit. Shea mentioned how every successful person he knows utilizes both their systems and their processes, and how they are so key to succeed in life. In his parting words, Shea touched upon not being afraid to fail, how every successful person has failed, and the importance of being open and willing to ask for help. So as we conclude today's episode, what do your systems and processes look like? How do you approach and deal with failure? The reality is very simple. At times in life, we will all fail. Some failures are larger and more devastating than others, but we all experience failure. I challenge you to change your optics towards failure. Don't expect it, prepare for it, nor anticipate it. But if and when failure does come, embrace it. Learn from it, grow from it, and use it to make you a better version of yourself as you go for your greatness. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.